What's going on? How you doing? So hopefully you're having a good day. Now, I I was watching First Take, and I feel like I need to talk about this the MVP race in the NBA because it's starting to seem like Jaylen Brown is kind of being diminished in whatever, but now it's like Cade Cunningham is being diminished as like a real MVP candidate because Shea Gilgis Alexander, SGA, returned from his injury, and now, if he stays on pace, he'll play more than the 65 games, which obviously is the benchmark you have to reach for end of the season awards. And it seems like because that's happening, SGA is now automatically going to be the MVP. But should he? Because, yes, if he does play out the rest of the season, he gets by it, he's putting up good numbers, right? He's averaging 31.8 points per game, 6.4 assists, 4.4 rebounds, which assist wise, up from his career numbers. I think rebounds basically the same, and points he's up from his career numbers. Shooting 55% from the field, which is crazy. Also, to take into effect, he does get a lot of foul calls and all that, which don't affect your field goal percentage, but either way, shooting 55% is remarkable. 33 minutes per game, so he's playing a lot, obviously. Now, we know that the MVP, the criteria from me to you, completely different, right? Some people just look at it as best player, MVP. I'm one of those who likes to look at the part of the V being the value and whether or not you're actually more valuable to your team. Not to say SGA isn't valuable to the Thunder, because he obviously is. I mean, he's missed some games, and we saw their play on the court slip. But to kind of disregard Cade Cunningham and Jaylen Brown, I feel like is a little bit disrespectful to both. So, like I said, was watching First Take, and they brought on that Joe Fortin whatever guy, that the ESPN bet guy. And he was talking about how bettors don't like the 65 game rule because it makes it hard to like bet on these awards, which if I'm the league, I could care less about that. But then he also said that like if SGA didn't make it to 65, if Wemby doesn't make it to 65, if Jokic doesn't make it to 65, and like Cade Cunningham wins MVP, is Cade Cunningham really the MVP, or is he only the MVP because of being the last one standing? That's where I have an issue. Because let's not sit here and act like if Cade Cunningham or Jaylen Brown won MVP, they wouldn't absolutely deserve it. Cade Cunningham, by the way, leading the Detroit Pistons, who are 43-14, which I should have said SGA's Thunder are 45-15, but the Pistons are 43-14, best record in the East, and only slightly, less than the Thunder, like a game and a half worse than the Thunder. SGA's played 49 games. Cade Cunningham's played 51, which obviously he'll get to the 65, barring anything unforeseen. But Cade Cunningham's averaging 25.4 points, 9.8 assists, 5.7 rebounds on 46% shooting, and 35 minutes per game. So yes, point-wise, he's not up there with SGA, but assists and rebounds, he's better than SGA. And the assist is by a good margin. So yes, Cade Cunningham doesn't have the scoring punch as SGA, but the numbers would tell you is because he's setting up more guys than SGA does. So that speaks to, I guess, SGA's role with the Thunder, a little bit different than Cade's role with the Pistons, but Cade is still very much valuable to that team because if you took him away from the Pistons would struggle to create offense because Cade Cunningham is their primary ball handler. And they have a lot of other guys that play off of Cade that if you took Cade away would have to elevate their roles, and I don't think a lot of those guys are able to do that without Cade. So Cade is very much very valuable to a very good basketball team up in Detroit. Now, you guys know I'm a Celtics fan, so I always, I always feel some type of way when people try to diminish what Jaylen Brown is doing this season. So Jaylen Brown, 52 games. The Celtics are 38 and 20, 29.1 points, 4.8 assists, 7.1 rebounds, 48% shooting, 34.5 minutes per game. So when you look at Jaylen Brown, what's in his favor? One, the Celtics are second in the East. They are 5.5 back of Detroit, but they are still having a really good season. Mind you, this is without Jason Tatum, which, quick side note here, the fact that now I'm looking up on like TikTok or wherever, and now the conversations have gone from, remember a couple of years ago, they couldn't play together, then it was who's the alpha, who's better, and now it's, if Jaylen Brown wins MVP, does that finally prove that he's better than Jason Tatum? Which, once again, can we stop doing this either or stuff? What Brown is doing this year proves why he and Tatum are arguably the best duo in the NBA. That's the conversations that we need to have. So I'm so sick of the conversation about either or the kind of clickbait accounts that are out there trying to make it seem like Jaylen Brown doesn't want Jason Tatum to come back from injury because he's having so much fun being the primary guy, which, Jaylen Brown said himself, he wants Tatum back, obviously, but neither here nor there. So when you look at Jaylen Brown, he's leading a team in Boston that, if you look at Boston's roster compared to Oklahoma City's roster, I feel like the majority of NBA people would take Oklahoma City's roster over Boston's. I think you could say the same thing for Detroit with Cade Cunningham. Matching up roster to roster, you would take the Thunder's roster probably over Detroit's roster. So that's where I feel like the value part comes in when you're talking about Cade and Jaylen Brown. So Jaylen Brown is doing this without Jason Tatum. So if you wanted to say, like, Jason Tatum is the number one guy, out of SGA, Cade, and Brown, Brown is the one who, I guess, started off as a lesser role and has taken on a bigger role this year than Cade and SGA, because Cade and SGA are just doing what they normally do, just better. So he has that. And then you have to look at expectations, right? The Thunder expectations going into the season, they would kind of be where they are. One of the top teams in the league, one of the NBA favorites for winning the title in June. And that's where they are. So they're right on par with everybody's expectations. Now, Detroit, I think a lot of people were looking at Detroit to have a good season this year. I don't know necessarily like best in the East, but there were conversations about Detroit being in that conversation before the season, because the East was kind of wide open, knowing that, Halliburton was going to miss time, and, the Pacers are, way worse than probably people thought, but, Halliburton missing time, Tatum missing time was going to knock Boston down. So Detroit was kind of in the conversation with, Knicks and the Cavs, as in the Magic were one of those teams that a lot of people thought were going to be in the top four. So, yes, I think Detroit is, record-wise, having a really good season. But positioning in the East, they might be a little bit better. But that still speaks to Cade's value. Jaylen Brown is with a Celtics team that I wonder how many average fans could name, 4 guys on the Celtics team besides Jaylen Brown and Peyton Pritchard. And not including Tatum, I'm talking about like people who are actively playing. So he has a roster with a lot of unknowns that had a lot of turnover in the offseason, that they are still kind of in the position they were in last year. when you had Porzingis, you had Holiday, you had Horford, Cornette. Those are 4 big rotational guys that they swapped out for lesser known people, and they're still winning at a high level. So I think if you want to look at the value part, I feel like Cade, Jaylen Brown have more of an argument for SGA. Once again, I'm not taking anything away from SGA, the player, but if we're going to really treat this award as most valuable player, I just don't know if SGA should be the overwhelming favorite, which he apparently is according to Vegas, because he's now back on the court, and the expectation is I think he's going to play 66 games or something, which would be just above the 65 game, threshold. So that's just, yeah, I just think it's kind of disrespectful, as I said before, to make it seem like Cade and Jaylen Brown were kind of just placeholding the MVP conversation, and we're all supposed to be hoping that SGA or Jokic or somebody can play enough games to get the award because they're the true MVPs. Let's stop doing that. And also, kind of work this in here, they also talked about, is a 65 game rule a good thing? I still say it is. I know a lot of people are looking at this season with a bunch of guys who are going to fall short of the 65 and now want to sit here and act like 65 is, I guess, too strict of a rule for off-season awards. I don't think so. You got to remember, the league is trying to get guys to play more. So what the league is looking to do is these guys who want to take 20 games off during the season for maintenance and all this kind of stuff. No, the league's trying to end that. So obviously if you have a legit injury, that's fine. But if you have a legit injury and you're playing less than 65 games in a season, should you really deserve any awards anyway? So I think people are just, being way too, I guess, black and white with this 65 game rule, and are like, oh my God, you're telling me Wemby can't get it because he didn't play 65 games? Well, I guess so. Because you're missing more than that. You're missing basically a quarter of the season. And if you're only playing 75% of the season, you got guys out here playing 85, 90%. Shouldn't those guys kind of be looked at for awards more as a reward for going through the rigors of the season and playing a lot of games? But that's just me. You let me know. If you think the 65 game rule is bad for the league, let me know in the comments. Also, what do you think about the MVP race? How do you handicap it? So for me, if I was to have an MVP vote, which I obviously don't, but hey, maybe somebody from the league will hear this, but I would probably go Cade 1, Jaylen Brown 2, and then you can throw SGA 3. But then, I guess if Jokic hits the benchmark, I'd probably put Jokic 3. That's just me. So, yeah, it's always the tricky part, right? With these awards, trying to make it where it's not just the quote-unquote best player, because even the best player argument is a little bit convoluted, but you know how the awards go. It usually goes to the best team. And yes, percentage-wise, Oklahoma City is the best team in the league, but actually I was wrong about that. Record-wise, Detroit actually has the best record. They're 754 winning percentage. The Thunder are 750. So it's like splitting hairs, but I don't know. I feel like that should lean to Cade Cunningham in the MVP race. But yeah, but we know how it is. If SGA gets 65 games, they're probably going to give it to him because whatever. He's seen as the best player in the league. But that's all I got for you. Appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure, drop some feedback, like, subscribe, share, leave a review, all that good stuff. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Make sure you enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe. God bless. Until next time, I'm out of here. All right. Bye.